Transport Minister Richard Holden is with us this morning for the government. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Obviously, we want to talk about the Israel-Hamas war. An Israeli soldier freed overnight. Great news for her family. How much hope does that give us for British citizens who were held there?
Well, you can see what the Prime Ministers and other members of the government, the Foreign Secretaries in the UAE of the weekend, the Prime Minister's obviously been to Israel, right across the Middle East as well. I think we are putting huge efforts in, both for our own civilians who are stuck in Gaza, but also, I think, to try and have that humanitarian pause as well, to try and get aid in and people who need to out of the Gaza Strip as well. This is not an easy situation, and you can understand the way that Israel has responded following the attacks, the worst we've seen on the Jewish community since the end of the Second World War. And I think we've got to see things in that context as well, is that this is an existential threat to Israel.
But is this good news for the British hostages?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's positive news that things are able to change. But, we are living in a situation where, we're trying to deal with a very difficult terror group who are running Gaza.
You mentioned the UAE there. It's not safe to go there at the moment. Is that what the Foreign Office is saying?
I think there's multiple different countries where Foreign Office advice changes from time to time. But obviously, when we're dealing with some of the regional players there, have got different links in, and it's really important that we use every avenue available, whether that's in Egypt, parts of which it's also recommended. It's recommended you don't travel to, or other countries, that we really have those conversations with people and try and do everything we can to look after British citizens who are stuck out there in Gaza at the moment.
Is the UK content that all actions taken by Israel are within the Geneva Convention?
Well, I think that obviously I'm not a lawyer. It's not really.
No, but you're representing the government this morning.
I am indeed, and so but on a personal level, I'm not a international lawyer. But at the moment, I think I've not seen anything which really says that it isn't. And what I want to do though is I want Israel to respond in a sensible way to this. I don't want it to. I want it to operate within the international system. And I think it's very difficult for Israel at the same time, who are fighting essentially a terrorist organisation who have no rules. And I think it's really important that we also recognise the difficulty that they have in doing that.
Minister, talk to me about hospitals, though. 14,000 people, we're told, by medical officials are sheltering in place at the Al-Quds hospital. Reuters saying medical officials claiming yesterday that airstrikes are very near to those major hospitals. Is that something that the British government condones?
I think the truth is Israel has to be able to defend itself. We know from Hamas...
So is that a yes?
We know from Hamas... I mean, on every... You can't expect the government to comment on every single individual...
I'm asking you about 14,000 people sheltering in place
and
in
we're not...
And
just...
Do you condone that?
And let me...
When it's not targeted, but just several metres away.
I can't comment on every single individual strike that the Israelis make. I think that would just be...
Even if it's against the Geneva Convention?
Well, Well, let's just see whether or not it is. What we know is that...
Is it something that you'd be looking into?
Let me finish, Kay. What we know is that, actually, Hamas deliberately hides among civilian populations. It digs tunnels right through residential areas where it hides its fighters, arms and munitions. It deliberately does that. And we saw recently when they were launching, literally, those missiles from a graveyard next to a hospital.
Reportedly.
And then they hit the... Well, that's what UK intelligence sources say.
Likely, they said. They didn't say definitely. They said likely.
Indeed, that is true. But they were launching these missiles from nearby and, as you say, they likely hit their own hospital.
I don't say it. Your Prime Minister says it.
Our Prime Minister, I think, okay, and the Prime Minister under which runs the government in which Sky News operates under in a free and fair way in the UK through Ofcom codes, etc., etc.
Not sure where we're going with that.
I
want to quote the Geneva Convention to you. Civilians shall not be the object of attack in war. Also prohibits indiscriminate attacks, which are those that may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, potentially, like airstrikes near to hospitals?
I don't think... Israel isn't targeting civilians. Israel is...
It doesn't have to target them. It could be incidental loss of civilian life.
I think Israel is doing what it can to avoid the loss of civilian life. We know from the other side that Hamas deliberately went out to murder civilians. Yet, in response to that, if you've got an enemy which is deliberately hiding as a terrorist organisation in an urban environment, it is incredibly difficult. I don't deny that. It really is. And I want Israel to operate fully within the rules of law and the rules of engagement. But it's an incredibly difficult situation, especially when you're facing a terrorist organisation who wants to fight you, to wipe you off the face of the earth. And I think it's really important we see what's happening in that context.
OK. What about at home? The Home Secretary yesterday, Suella Braverman, after the Cobra meeting, criticised pro-Palestinian marchers where they were using anti-Semitic chanting. She described it as hate marches. Do you agree?
I think it's quite clear that there are some people on those marches who were marching in because they hate people. Some people have been arrested over the last few weeks. I think about 4 dozen now have been arrested over the last few weeks because they're openly and in public supporting Hamas and other terrorist organisations. And the reason that they're a terrorist organisation, one of the reasons they've been banned in the UK, Hamas, is because they don't just have a political issue or an objective. They genuinely want to wipe out all Jewish people and just destroy the entire state of Israel.
Minister, but is it appropriate to describe the whole march as hate marches?
I think what the Home Secretary was saying was that there is... You can see, if you are viewing that as a Jewish person living in the UK, with dozens of people over the last few weeks having been arrested on these marches, promoting terrorist organisations, how you would see that as a march of hate. OK. I'm
going to give you a swerve on the COVID inquiry because you weren't in government at the time. You'll be pleased to know.
I wasn't, no.
Moving on that one. £2 bus fare cap in place because HS2 is being scrapped. What's the correlation between the two? So,
as you'll know, I think we've talked about it before, Kay. We had a pilot of the Get Around for £2 bus fare at the start of the year, extended that twice until the end of October, the 31st of October, and now we're able to extend it all the way through to the end of 2024, giving people some real help, particularly those, my constituents, people across the country who use bus as their primary means of getting around, often lower-paid workers, often younger people as well, so it should be a real boost to them. We've seen inflation actually drop in terms of bus fares in England because of this policy, so it's helping people with the cost of living, unlike in other parts of the country as well. So I think that's incredibly important. The link to HS2 is that what we've done is the £6.5 billion element, which we're getting from the Euston to Old Oak Common leg, which we're now turning into more of a private sector development. That money we're able to free up to do other schemes across the UK. Some of that's going into capital, like the electrification of the North Wales line. Some of it is going into things like the £2 bus scheme, which is going to be rolled out for another year, which I think is really helpful now in terms of transport for people. Obviously, the majority of the cancellation of the second phase of HS2, around 36 billion quid, that's money is going directly into the Midlands and the north of England. But the £6.5 billion we're saving specifically from the Euston element with the private sector development we're doing there instead, that's going on schemes across the rest of the UK.
Have you ever been to Barnard Castle to test your eyesight? I'm kidding.
I have, but not to test my eyesight.
It's nice to see you. Thank you.